My son Terrell spent 28 years telling people his mother was just some cleaning lady from the South Side. Last Monday, when he showed up at my little apartment in tears, desperately asking why his life was suddenly falling apart, I looked him in the eyes and said, "Baby, there are things about your mama you never bothered to ask." Then I walked to my bedroom and pulled out a small wooden box I'd kept hidden for 3 decades. What happened next would make him question everything he thought he knew about the woman who raised him. But to understand how we got to that moment, I need to take you back to where it all began. Back to when I was Ruby Mae Smith, a 19-year-old girl from Jackson, Mississippi, who came to Chicago with nothing but $47 in her pocket, a cardboard suitcase held together with duct tape, and a determination that burned hotter than the summer sun on concrete. I arrived in Chicago on a freezing February morning in 1982, stepping off that Greyhound bus on the streets that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. The wind cut through my thin coat like a knife, and I realized immediately that Mississippi hadn't prepared me for this kind of cold. But I hadn't come this far to turn back because of weather. The South Side welcomed me with the smell of fried chicken, mixing with exhaust fumes, the sound of blues spilling from corner bars even at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sight of women just like me who had made the same journey north, chasing dreams that seemed impossible back home. These were women who understood what it meant to reinvent yourself in a place where nobody knew your story. My grandmother had given me 2 addresses before I left Jackson. The first was a boarding house on 79th Street where I could rent a room for $15 a week. The second was an employment agency that specialized in placing domestic workers. Ruby Mae, she told me as she pressed those folded papers into my hands, sometimes you got to be invisible to see everything. Sometimes you got to let folks underestimate you while you building something they can't even imagine. Those words would prove more prophetic than either one of us could have known. The boarding house was a narrow 3-story building painted an optimistic yellow that had faded to the color of old mustard. Mrs. Patterson, the landlady, was a stern woman in her 60s who had made the same journey from Mississippi 30 years earlier. She looked me up and down when I knocked on her door, taking in my cheap coat and cardboard suitcase. "You got the $15?" she asked without preamble.
"Yes, ma'am." "You got references?" "I got a letter from my pastor back home." She read the letter carefully, then nodded. "Room 2B, bathrooms down the hall, no men after 9 o'clock, no loud music ever. First week's rent up front." Room 2B was barely larger than a closet, with a single window that looked out onto an alley where stray cats fought over garbage. The furniture consisted of a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a dresser with a mirror so cracked it split my reflection into 3 different people. But it was mine, and it was in Chicago, and it was the beginning of everything. The employment agency was located in a basement office that smelled like coffee and resignation. The woman behind the desk, Mrs. Rodriguez, had the efficient manner of someone who had placed thousands of workers in jobs they didn't want but needed. "Any experience?" she asked, not looking up from her paperwork. "I cleaned houses back home, cooked too." "Can you read?" "Yes, ma'am." "Graduated high school?" That made her look up. "High school graduate. That's good. Means you can follow written instructions, handle paperwork." She shuffled through a stack of index cards. "Got a night cleaning position downtown. Meridian Tower, 40 floors of offices. $5 an hour, 6 nights a week. You interested?" $5 an hour was more money than I'd ever made in my life. "Yes, ma'am." "Starts Monday. Be there at 11 p.m. sharp. Ask for Mr. Henderson. He's the night supervisor. And honey," she finally looked at me directly, "these downtown jobs, they're good if you pay attention. You see how business works. You learn how money moves. You just gotta be smart enough to watch and listen. My first night at Meridian Tower changed my understanding of what wealth looked like. I'd grown up thinking rich people were the ones who owned the general store or the funeral home back in Jackson. But this building housed a different kind of wealth entirely. Lawyers who handled million-dollar deals, investment advisors who managed portfolios worth more than entire Mississippi towns, real estate developers who bought and sold properties like they were trading baseball cards. Mr. Henderson was a thin black man in his 50s who had been cleaning downtown buildings for 20 years. He showed me how to work efficiently, how to be invisible when the late working executives were still in their offices, and most importantly, how to keep my ears open. These people, he told me as we emptied trash cans on the 32nd floor, they think cleaning folks are deaf and dumb. They'll discuss million-dollar deals right in front of you like you're not even there. You want to get ahead in life? Listen to everything and remember what you hear. The first thing I learned was that real estate was like a game with rules that most people didn't know. I listened to conversations about leveraging equity, capitalizing on market timing, and identifying undervalued properties in emerging neighborhoods. Terms I'd never heard before became familiar through repetition. I also learned that information was valuable. Knowing which neighborhoods were scheduled for infrastructure improvements could help you buy property before prices rose. Understanding zoning changes could tell you where new businesses would open. Recognizing demographic shifts could predict where young professionals would want to live. But most importantly, I learned that real estate wasn't magic. It was research, patience, and having the courage to act when others were too cautious or too comfortable to take risks. By day, I lived in my tiny room, sleeping on sheets I'd bought at a discount store and eating canned soup heated on a hot plate. I spent my afternoons at the public library, reading real estate investment books and studying neighborhood development patterns. I walked through different areas of the city, observing which blocks were improving and which ones were declining. By night, I was a ghost in a glass tower, absorbing knowledge that was transforming my understanding of how money worked. 3 months into my cleaning job, I overheard a conversation that would change my life forever. 2 lawyers were discussing a property foreclosure in Bronzeville. The owner had defaulted on a $12,000 loan, and the building was scheduled for auction the following week. It was a 6-unit apartment building that was structurally sound but cosmetically neglected. "Neighborhood's rough now," one lawyer said, "but it's got good bones. Give it 10 years and that area will come back strong. Someone with patience could make serious money." That night, I took 3 buses to Bronzeville and walked around that building for 2 hours. It was a red brick structure with beautiful architectural details that had been painted over or covered with cheap siding. The neighborhood was struggling, no doubt about it, but I could see signs of potential that others might miss. There was a community garden being maintained by local residents. There were families on the porches who knew each other's names. There were small businesses, a corner store, a barber shop, a church, that suggested people were invested in staying and improving their community. I had $2,847 in my savings account after 3 months of working 6 nights a week and living on soup and crackers. The minimum bid for the foreclosure auction was $8,000. Most people would have walked away. Most people would have said it was impossible. But I wasn't most people. I was Ruby Mae Smith from Jackson, Mississippi, and I had learned that impossible was just another word for nobody's tried hard enough yet. I worked double shifts for the next month,
cleaning the Meridian Tower, and picking up weekend work at 2 other buildings. I sold my winter coat and bought a thinner one at Goodwill. I ate 1 meal a day and walked everywhere to save bus fare. I called my cousin Delilah in Detroit and borrowed $2,500 against her car title, promising to pay her back with interest within 6 months. I also did something that required more courage than I knew I possessed. I approached Mr. Henderson and asked if he knew anyone who might lend money for a real estate investment.
"You thinking about buying property?" he asked, surprised. "I'm thinking about buying a building." He studied my face for a long moment. "How old are you, Ruby Mae?" 19. 19 years old, and you want to buy a building. What do you know about being a landlord? I know how to work hard. I know how to treat people fairly, and I know this building is going to be worth more than they're asking for it. Mr. Henderson was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. "This is my brother-in-law, Jerome. He's got money saved up, and he's always looking for good investments. Tell him I sent you." Jerome Washington was a man in his 40s who owned a small construction company. He listened to my proposal with the patient attention of someone who had heard a lot of ambitious plans from young people. "You want me to lend you $3,000 so you can buy a building in Bronzeville?" "Yes, sir." "What's my collateral?" "My collateral is that I'm going to pay you back with 15% interest within 1 year, and if this investment works out the way I think it will, I'm going to bring you more opportunities in the future. And if it doesn't work out, then you'll own a building in Bronzeville, and I'll owe you $3,000 that I'll spend the rest of my life paying back." He laughed at that. "You got confidence, I'll give you that. Why should I bet on a 19-year-old cleaning lady?" "Because this 19-year-old cleaning lady has been listening to million-dollar real estate deals for 3 months, and she knows opportunity when she sees it." Jerome lent me the money. On the day of the auction, I showed up in my best dress, the same one I'd worn to high school graduation, with $8,200 in cash in an envelope. There were 7 other bidders, all of them men in suits who looked at me like I was lost. The auctioneer called for opening bids. A man in a gray suit immediately bid $8,000. Another bid $8,500. When they reached $9,000, I raised my hand. $9,200, I said in a voice that didn't shake, even though my heart was pounding like a jackhammer. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, this young black woman who clearly didn't belong in their world of real estate investment. I could see them calculating, wondering if I was serious, if I even had the money. The bidding continued. $9,500, $9,800. When it hit $10,000, 4 of the bidders dropped out. When it reached $11,500, only 2 men remained. $12,000, one of them said, confident that he finally priced out the cleaning lady who had wandered into the wrong auction. I looked him directly in the eyes and said, $12,500. That was every penny I had in the world, plus money I'd borrowed against my future, plus hope I'd scraped together from impossible circumstances. The man stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away. "Sold," the auctioneer said, "to the young lady in the blue dress. I owned my first building at 19 years old. The renovation took 10 months and taught me more about construction, plumbing, electrical work, and project management than any college course could have provided. I worked on the building every day after my cleaning shifts, learning to install drywall from YouTube videos that I watched at the library, and mastering basic plumbing from a neighbor who taught me in exchange for home-cooked meals. I painted every wall myself, choosing colors that would make small apartments feel larger and brighter. I refinished the hardwood floors by hand, working section by section until my knees were raw and my back ached constantly. I replaced fixtures, repaired windows, and transformed 6 rundown apartments into homes that working families could afford and be proud of. My first tenants were a single mother named Gloria, who worked 2 jobs at a hospital, an elderly man named Mr. Patterson, who was a retired postal worker, a young couple starting their first teaching jobs, and 3 other families who had been struggling to find decent housing they could afford. I charged them below market rent because I remembered what it felt like to choose between groceries and bus fare. But I also set clear expectations about property care, noise levels, and community respect. I wanted to create not just affordable housing, but a place where people felt safe and valued. Within 6 months, my building was fully occupied with a waiting list. The rental income was covering the mortgage and generating enough profit for me to start looking for my next opportunity. More importantly, I had learned that real estate wasn't just about money. It was about providing stability for families, strengthening communities, and creating value that benefited everyone involved. That's when I met David Smith. David was a construction worker, 6 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to carry the world and hands that could build anything. He was working on a renovation project 3 blocks from my building when I first saw him. I was walking to the corner store, and he was on a lunch break, sitting on the tailgate of his pickup truck, eating a sandwich and reading a paperback book. "You the lady who bought the building on Cottage Grove?" he asked as I walked past. "I am," I replied, stopping to look at him properly for the first time. "My cousin Jerome lives in 2B. Says you the best landlord he's ever had. Says you actually fix things when they break instead of telling people to figure it out themselves." We talked for 30 minutes that day about the neighborhood, about the changes coming to the South Side, about books and dreams and the kind of life we wanted to build. He was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and when I mentioned that I had read it twice, his face lit up with genuine interest. "Not many people I know read books like that," he said. "Not many people I know carry books to construction sites," I replied. When I walked away, I knew I just met someone special. David and I dated for 2 years before we got married in a small ceremony at Mount Olive Baptist Church. He understood my ambition in a way that surprised me. Most men I'd met were intimidated by a woman who owned property and had business plans. David was proud of it. "You're building something that's going to last," he told me on our wedding night. "You're creating generational wealth. That's not just smart, Ruby Mae. That's revolutionary." By the time we got married, I owned 4 buildings and was managing 22 rental units. David brought construction skills and industry connections that helped us renovate properties more efficiently and cost effectively. We made a good team. I handled the financial planning and tenant relations while he managed the physical maintenance and improvement projects. When I got pregnant with Terrell, David and I had serious conversations about our future. The real estate market in our neighborhood was starting to heat up exactly as those lawyers had predicted years earlier. Property values were rising, but so were property taxes and the cost to maintaining our buildings. We also faced a choice about how to present ourselves to the world. Our real estate portfolio was generating substantial income, but we were still living modestly and working traditional jobs. We could continue that approach, building wealth quietly while maintaining our working class identity, or we could start living more ostentatiously and risk attracting attention from people who might resent our success. "We have a choice," David said as I rubbed my growing belly. "We can sell what we have and take a profit, or we can hold on and build something that our son will inherit." "What do you think we should do?" I asked. "I think we should build an empire," he said. "But I think we should be smart about it, and I think we should keep it quiet."
When Terrell was little, he loved coming with me to collect rent from our properties. He'd help me carry the toolbox when we went to fix leaky faucets or replace light bulbs. He'd sit in David's truck while we walked through potential new purchases, calculating renovation costs and rental income projections. "Mama, why do we own so many buildings?" he asked me once when he was 7 years old. "Because buildings are how we take care of people," I told him. Every family that lives in one of our buildings has a safe place to come home to. That's important, maybe. That's how we make the world a little bit better. He understood it then, or at least, I thought he did. The problem started when Terrell began attending school in Hyde Park. We had moved to a beautiful Victorian house by then, a property we'd bought as a foreclosure and renovated ourselves. The house was in a neighborhood with excellent schools and families who valued education. I was still cleaning offices downtown, but our real estate portfolio had grown to 18 properties, generating substantial monthly income. That was a conscious choice. We had seen what happened to people who got too flashy too quickly. We had watched friends and neighbors come into money and lose it just as fast because they spent it all on cars and clothes and status symbols instead of investing it in appreciating assets. But Terrell didn't understand the strategy. He only saw that his mother cleaned buildings, while other kids' mothers were lawyers and doctors and business executives. He saw that I wore a uniform to work every night, while other families took vacations to Europe and drove luxury cars. "Why can't you get a better job?" he asked me when he was in 5th grade. "What makes you think this isn't a good job?" I asked him. "Because it's embarrassing. Marcus's mom is a corporate executive. Keisha's mom is a college professor. You just clean up after other people."
That conversation broke my heart in ways I couldn't explain to him. How could I tell an 11-year-old that his mother's embarrassing job had bought their house, funded our family's financial security, and built a portfolio worth more than most of his classmates' parents would see in their lifetimes? David and I had long discussions about whether we should tell Terrell the truth about our financial situation, but we kept coming back to the same concerns. He wasn't ready. He was still learning who he was, still figuring out his values. If he knew we were wealthy, would he still work hard in school? Would he still treat all people with respect regardless of their economic status? Would he understand that money was a tool, not a goal? We decided to wait until he was older, until he had demonstrated maturity and character, until he had proven that he understood the difference between wealth and worth. That decision would define our family relationships for the next 2 decades. High school was when Terrell's embarrassment about my job became something more serious. He stopped mentioning me to his friends. When parent-teacher conferences came up, he'd ask David to go alone. When his friends came to the house, he'd find excuses to keep them from meeting me. "Why are you ashamed of me?" I asked him one night after he'd rushed a friend out of the house when I came home from work. "I'm not ashamed of you, Mama," he said, but he wouldn't look me in the eyes. "I just don't want people to judge our family based on what you do for work." "And what exactly do you think I do for work?" He said, "You clean buildings. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not exactly impressive when all my friends' parents are professionals." I wanted to tell him everything that night. I wanted to take him to the bank and show him our statements. I wanted to drive him to our properties and explain how each one represented careful planning, smart investments, and years of strategic thinking. I wanted him to understand that his mother wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a businesswoman who had built something extraordinary from nothing. But I also wanted him to respect me for who I was, not for what I owned. I wanted him to understand that there was dignity in all honest work, that a person's value wasn't determined by their job title or their income. I wanted him to learn these lessons before he learned about the money. So I kept quiet, and I continued to go to work every night, cleaning the offices of people who made less money than I did, but commanded more respect from my own son. College was supposed to be a fresh start for Terrell. He earned a partial academic scholarship to Northwestern University, and David and I quietly covered the remaining costs. We told Terrell he would need to take out student loans for the balance, but we secretly paid his tuition, room and board directly to the university. The loan documents he signed were real, but we made the payments ourselves. For 4 years, Terrell studied business and marketing while living the typical college experience. He made friends, joined the Black Student Union, played intramural basketball, and gradually became more confident and outgoing. But his embarrassment about his family's working-class background never went away. If anything, it intensified as he spent more time around classmates whose families had generational wealth and professional achievement. When he brought friends home for holidays, he'd introduce David as a contractor and me as someone who worked downtown. He never lied exactly, but he never told the whole truth either. He changed the subject quickly whenever conversations turned to family backgrounds or career aspirations. I watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. I was proud of the young man he was becoming, intelligent, ambitious, socially conscious, but I was heartbroken by his continued shame about our family's working-class roots. During his junior year, Terrell started dating a young woman named Vanessa Carter, whose father was a federal judge and whose mother was a pediatric surgeon. Vanessa was smart, accomplished, and kind, but she came from a world of established wealth and professional achievement that made Terrell even more self-conscious about his background. When Vanessa came home with him for Thanksgiving that year, I watched my son navigate the conversation carefully, emphasizing David's skills as a construction contractor and my downtown job without providing too many details. Vanessa was polite and friendly, but I could see her making assumptions about our family's economic situation based on limited information. After graduation, Terrell moved to downtown Chicago and got a job at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm. He was making $48,000 a year and living in a studio apartment that cost $1,400 a month. He was struggling financially, working long hours and eating ramen noodles for dinner, but he was determined to make it on his own without asking for help from his blue-collar parents. Meanwhile, David and I had expanded our real estate portfolio to 24 properties. We owned apartment buildings, single-family homes, and small commercial spaces throughout the South Side and several suburbs. Our passive income was approaching $400,000 a year, and our net worth had crossed the $3 million mark. But Terrell didn't know any of this. To him, we were still the working-class parents he'd outgrown. The distance between us grew wider as the years passed. Terrell would visit for holidays and family occasions, but our conversations became increasingly superficial. He'd tell us about his work, his girlfriend, his ambitions, but he never asked about our lives in any meaningful way. He never asked how we were doing financially, what we were working on, or what our plans were for the future. I think he assumed he already knew everything about us. We were simple people with simple lives, and he was moving on to bigger and better things. The irony was painful. The son I had worked so hard to provide for had grown up to be ashamed of the very work that had made his opportunities possible. David and I talked frequently about whether we should intervene. Should we tell Terrell the truth about our wealth? Should we reveal that we'd been paying his student loans? Should we offer him seed money to start his own business or buy his own home? But every time we considered it, we'd remember his embarrassment, his casual dismissal of our intelligence and capabilities, his assumption that we couldn't possibly understand his world or his ambitions. We'd remember the way he introduced us to his friends and the way he changed the subject when conversations turned to family. He needs to learn to respect us for who we are before he learns about what we have, David said during one of these conversations. If we tell him now, he'll never know if he really values us or if he's just impressed by the money. So we waited and waited and waited. David died of a massive heart attack when Terrell was 26 years old. It was sudden and devastating and completely unexpected. One day he was installing cabinets in one of our rental properties, and the next day he was gone. Terrell came to the funeral, of course. He gave a beautiful eulogy about his father's work ethic and his dedication to family. But even in his grief, I could sense his discomfort with the funeral's location, Mount Olive Baptist Church in the heart of the South Side, and the attendees, mostly working-class Black families from our neighborhood and our tenants who had come to pay their respects. After the service, as we were receiving condolences, I heard him explaining to a coworker who had attended. My father was a construction contractor, very hands-on guy, worked hard his whole life. Again, not a lie, but not the whole truth either. In the weeks following David's death, I had to make some major decisions about our business. David had been the public face of our property management, the one who dealt with contractors and vendors and handled most of the physical maintenance issues. I could continue that work myself, but it would mean stepping out of the shadows and becoming more visible as a businesswoman. I also had to decide what to tell Terrell about his inheritance. David and I had written wills that left everything to our son, but we had also included provisions that would reveal the true extent of our wealth only when we felt he was ready to handle it responsibly. I decided to continue managing our properties quietly while observing Terrell's continued development. I wanted to see if his character would mature, if his values would deepen, if he would ever show genuine curiosity about his parents' lives rather than embarrassment about our backgrounds. For the next 2 years, I watched and waited. Terrell continued working at Morrison and Associates. He got promoted to senior account executive and moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in River North. His relationship with Vanessa had ended during his senior year of college, and he was now dating a lawyer named Michelle who seemed nice enough, but who clearly came from money and carried herself with the subtle confidence that generational wealth often produces. During family dinners, I'd listen to Terrell and Michelle discuss their careers, their social lives, their weekend trips to Milwaukee and Minneapolis. They talk about their retirement planning and their strategies for saving for a house down payment. They'd mention student loan payments and their efforts to build good credit scores. Michelle would make polite conversation with me, asking about my cleaning work with the kind of sympathetic interest that well-meaning people show towards service workers. She'd ask if the hours were difficult, if my back hurt from all the physical labor, if I ever thought about finding something a little easier as I got older. I'd smile and give vague answers while thinking about the quarterly profit statements from our real estate portfolio, the renovation budgets I was reviewing, the potential acquisitions I was considering. I think about the irony of this lawyer who made $125,000 a year feeling sorry for a woman whose passive income was more than triple her salary. But what hurt most was watching my son nod along with these conversations, watching him allow his girlfriend to patronize his mother, watching him fail to defend me or redirect the conversation or show any indication that he valued my intelligence, my experience, or my contributions to his life. The breaking point came 2 years after David's death. Terrell and Michelle had been dating for 8 months, and their relationship was getting serious. During Sunday dinner at my house, Michelle started talking about their plans to move in together and eventually get married. "We're looking at places in Lincoln Park," she said. "Nothing too fancy, but something with good bones that we can improve over time." "How much are you looking to spend?" I asked.
Probably around $450,000, Terrell said. It's a stretch on our budget, but we think we can make it work with both our incomes combined. Have you been pre-approved for a mortgage? We're working on it, Michelle said. Terrell's student loan debt is making it a little complicated, but my parents have offered to help with the down payment. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, whose education I had secretly funded, whose future I had been securing for 28 years. He was sitting at my dinner table in the house I had bought and renovated, eating food I had cooked, planning to accept money from his girlfriend's parents because he assumed his own mother couldn't help him. "Terrell," I said carefully, "have you ever considered asking me about helping with the down payment?" He looked uncomfortable. "Mama, I know you don't have that kind of money. I wouldn't want to put you in a difficult position." "What kind of difficult position?" "Well, you know, cleaning buildings doesn't exactly pay enough for you to be lending money for house down payments." Michelle nodded sympathetically. "Ruby May, that's so sweet of you to offer, but we know you work really hard for your money. We wouldn't want to take your savings."
I sat there for a moment, looking at these two young people who thought they knew everything about economics and success and family dynamics. They had no idea that the woman they were patronizing owned more real estate than they would likely accumulate in their entire careers. What if I told you that I could write you a check for the down payment today? Terrell laughed. Mama, you don't need to pretend. I know you'd help if you could. I'm not pretending, baby. I'm asking what you would say if I told you I could write you a check for $90,000 right now, today, without affecting my financial security at all. The laughter died on his lips. Michelle looked confused. They both stared at me like I had started speaking in tongues. That's impossible, Terrell said finally. Why is it impossible? Because you're a cleaning lady, Mama. You make maybe $30,000 a year. You don't have $90,000. I stood up from the table and walked to my room. I opened my closet and pulled out the wooden box I'd mentioned at the beginning of this story. Inside were documents I'd been collecting for 3 decades. Property deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios, business licenses, tax returns, insurance policies. I brought the box back to the dinner table and set it down in front of my son. Open it, I said. Terrell looked at Michelle, then back at me. Mama, what is this? Open it, baby. There are things about your mama you never bothered to ask. He opened the box slowly, like he was afraid something might jump out at him. The first document he saw was a bank statement showing a balance of $927,000 in my primary checking account. His eyes widened, but I could see him struggling to process what he was seeing. This must be a mistake, he said.
Keep looking. He pulled out property deed after property deed. The building where his childhood friend Marcus still lived with his family. The apartment complex where his high school girlfriend Keisha's grandmother had moved after retiring. The commercial space that housed his favorite barber shop from when he was a teenager. The single-family homes scattered throughout Bronzeville, Hyde Park, Chatham, and now expanding into Evanston and Oak Park. Each deed had my name on it, Ruby Mae Smith, owner. I don't understand, Michelle whispered. Terrell was silent, rifling through document after document. Tax returns showing annual rental income of $387,000. Investment statements from mutual funds and stock portfolios managed by a downtown firm. Insurance policies on properties worth millions of dollars. Business licenses for Ruby Mae Property Management, LLC, established in 1985. Business loan documents showing my company as the lender for several small businesses in our community. The barber shop, a corner market, a child care center. All loans that were being repaid with interest, creating additional income streams. When he reached the bottom of the box, he found a summary sheet I had prepared years earlier. A complete accounting of our family's wealth. 24 properties with a combined value of $3.2 million, $1.3 million in cash and liquid investments, $247,000 in business loan receivables, annual passive income of $387,000. Total net worth, $4.1 million. Terrell stared at that number for a long time. Then he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Mama," he said in a voice that sounded like a child's, "what is this?"
This is what I've been building for the last 30 years while you've been embarrassed about my job. But how? How is this possible? The same way any business gets built, baby. One smart decision at a time, one property at a time, 1 year at a time. Michelle was looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. Ruby May, are you saying you're a millionaire? I'm saying I'm a businesswoman who happens to also clean buildings. I'm saying that for 28 years, my son has assumed he knew everything about me based on one part-time job. Terrell was still staring at the documents. But why didn't you tell me? That question hung in the air like smoke. It was the question I'd been waiting for him to ask, and it was also the question I dreaded answering honestly. Because, I said, choosing my words carefully, I wanted you to respect me for who I am, not for what I own. I wanted you to value hard work and humility and treating all people with dignity. I wanted you to understand that a person's worth isn't determined by their bank account. But you let me struggle. You let me take out student loans. You let me worry about money. You never took out student loans, Terrell. I paid your tuition directly to the school every semester. The loan documents you signed were real, but I made every payment. You never struggled financially. You just thought you did because you were too proud to live within your means or ask your family for help. You paid my tuition? His voice cracked. Every semester, every dime. $47,000 over 4 years.
He was quiet for a long time, processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd heard it since he was a child. Mama, I'm sorry. Sorry for what, baby? Sorry for being ashamed of you. Sorry for not asking about your life. Sorry for assuming I knew everything about you. I reached across the table and took his hand. The shame part hurts, Terrell. It hurts that my own son thought less of me because of honest work. But what hurts more is that you never asked. In 28 years, you never once asked me about my dreams, my plans, my goals, my achievements. You never asked because you assumed a cleaning lady couldn't have any of those things. Tears were running down his face now. I was wrong, Mama. I was so wrong. Yes, you were, but you're not wrong anymore, because now you know better. Michelle cleared her throat nervously. Ruby May, I owe you an apology too. I made assumptions about you based on very limited information. That was unfair and disrespectful. Apology accepted, I said. But I want you both to understand something. This money doesn't change who I am. I'm still the same woman who raised Terrell with love and discipline. I'm still the same woman who believes in hard work and treating all people with respect. I'm still the same woman who cleans buildings because I choose to, not because I have to. But you're also a multimillionaire, Terrell said, like he was still trying to make sense of it. I'm a person who happens to have accumulated wealth through smart investing and careful planning. The money is a tool, not an identity. And more importantly, it's not just my money. It's our family's wealth. Wealth that your father and I built with the intention of passing it down to you. To me? To you, when you're ready for it. When you've demonstrated that you understand the difference between having money and having character. Over the next few weeks, Terrell and I had many long conversations about our family's hidden history. I told him about buying my first building at 19. I told him about the late nights spent learning about real estate law and property management from library books. I told him about the careful planning and sacrifice that had gone into building our portfolio. I also told him about the decision to keep our wealth secret and why David and I had thought it was important for him to develop his own character and work ethic before learning about his inheritance. Do you think we made the right choice? I asked him during one of these conversations.
He was quiet for a long time. "I think," he said finally, "that if you had told me when I was younger, I might have become a different person. Maybe a worse person." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I might have become entitled. I might have thought I was better than other people because of money I didn't earn. I might have never learned to work hard or appreciate what I had. And now? Now I know that my mother is one of the smartest, strongest, most incredible women I've ever met. And I know that I have a lot to learn from her." It was a good conversation, a healing conversation. But it was also just the beginning of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect.
The relationship with Michelle didn't survive this revelation. She tried to be supportive and understanding, but the fundamental shift in family dynamics was too much for her to navigate. She had fallen in love with Terrell, partly because she saw him as someone who had made something of himself despite coming from a working class background. Learning that his family was actually wealthier than hers created an identity crisis that she couldn't resolve. They broke up amicably 3 months later, and while I was sorry to see her go, I wasn't surprised. Money has a way of changing relationships, even when you try to prevent it. Terrell, meanwhile, was going through his own identity crisis. For 28 years, he had defined himself partly in opposition to his family's working class status. He was the son who had made it out, who had transcended his background through education and professional achievement. Learning that his background was entirely different than he believed forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about himself. "I don't know who I am anymore," he told me one evening as we sat in my living room, going through financial documents and learning about the scope of our family's business operations. "You're the same person you've always been, smart, ambitious, hardworking. The only thing that's changed is your understanding of where you came from." But I built my whole identity around overcoming my circumstances. What does it mean that my circumstances were never what I thought they were? It was a profound question, and one that I anticipated he might struggle with. "It means," I said carefully, "that you did overcome circumstances. You overcame the circumstance of having parents who chose to hide their wealth from you. You overcame the circumstance of being raised to value character over money. You overcame the circumstance of learning to work hard and treat people with respect regardless of their economic status. But I didn't treat people with respect. I was ashamed of my own mother. You were ashamed of what you thought you knew about your mother. Now you know better and you can do better." The process of rebuilding our relationship took time and patience from both of us. Terrell had to learn to see me as a mentor and business partner rather than an embarrassment. I had to learn to forgive years of dismissal and disrespect while still holding him accountable for his past behavior.
We started working together on the business operations. Terrell would come with me to collect rent and handle tenant concerns. He learned about property maintenance, renovation planning, and the day-to-day challenges of being a landlord. More importantly, he met our tenants and began to understand the impact our business had on real families and communities. "Mrs. Johnson in Building 3 has been with us for 12 years, I told him during one of our property visits. She's raised 4 kids in that apartment, and all of them graduated from college. Mr. Williams in Building 7 is a veteran who was struggling with homelessness when we first rented to him. Now he's stable, employed, and helps us maintain the building. You are not just providing housing," Terrell said, beginning to understand. "You're providing stability." Exactly. Real estate isn't just about profit margins and property values. It's about giving people a foundation to build their lives on. These lessons were transformative for Terrell. He began to see our business not as a way to accumulate wealth, but as a way to serve our community while building financial security for our family. He started asking thoughtful questions about our tenant screening process, our maintenance standards, and our long-term development plans. 6 months after our revelation, Terrell made a decision that surprised me.
He quit his job at Morrison & Associates to work full-time in our family business. "Are you sure about this?" I asked him. "You worked hard to build your marketing career." "I worked hard to build a career that would make me feel successful," he said. "But I think I can have more impact working with you to build something that actually matters." His transition into the business was not without challenges. Terrell had to learn skills that weren't taught in business school: how to handle difficult tenants, how to manage renovation projects, how to navigate city bureaucracy for permits and inspections. He also had to adjust to working closely with his mother after years of maintaining emotional distance.
But he was a fast learner, and his marketing background proved valuable in ways we hadn't anticipated. He helped us develop better communication systems for our tenants, created more professional promotional materials for our rental properties, and established an online presence that helped us attract higher quality tenants. More importantly, he brought fresh ideas about how we could expand our impact in the community. He proposed offering financial literacy workshops for our tenants. He suggested partnering with local organizations to provide job training and placement services. He advocated for investing in properties that could serve as small business incubators for local entrepreneurs. "We have the resources to do more than just provide housing," he argued during one of our planning meetings. "We could be a catalyst for broader community development." It was exactly the kind of thinking I had hoped to see from him. He was learning to use wealth as a tool for positive change rather than just personal accumulation. The real test of our transformed relationship came a year later, when we received an offer to sell our entire real estate portfolio. A development company called Meridian Properties, ironically the same name as the building where I'd started my cleaning career, wanted to buy all 24 of our properties for $4.8 million, significantly more than their individual market values. They plan to demolish most of the buildings and construct luxury condominiums and retail spaces as part of a larger gentrification initiative. It was the kind of deal that could set our family up for generational wealth, beyond anything I had ever imagined. It was also the kind of deal that would displace hundreds of working-class families who had been our tenants for years, some for more than a decade. I called Terrell to discuss the offer. I expected the conversation to be difficult, weighing financial opportunity against community responsibility. Instead, his response was immediate and decisive. "We can't do this," he said. "You haven't even heard the full offer yet." "I don't need to. We'd be contributing to the displacement of our own community. We'd be participating in the same kind of gentrification that prices out working families and destroys neighborhood character." "It's $4.8 million, Terrell. That's generational wealth. We already have generational wealth. What we'd be selling is our integrity." His response filled me with pride, but I wanted to make sure he fully understood the implications of turning down such a significant offer. $4.8 million invested properly could provide passive income for your children and your children's children, I said. And displacing 200 families would provide guilt for my children and their children's children, he replied. Some things are more important than money. We spent the next hour discussing alternatives. Could we negotiate a deal that preserved affordable housing while still providing development opportunities? Could we partner with community organizations to ensure that existing tenants weren't displaced? Could we use this opportunity to expand our impact rather than simply maximize our profit? By the end of the conversation, we had decided to reject the straight buyout offer, but to counter with a proposal for a community-focused development partnership. Over the next month, Terrell and I worked with a team of lawyers, architects, and community development specialists to create an alternative proposal for Meridian Properties.
Instead of selling our properties for demolition, we proposed a joint venture that would renovate and expand our buildings while maintaining their affordability and community character. Our counterproposal included plans for mixed-income housing that would serve both working-class families and young professionals. It included retail spaces reserved for local businesses at below-market rents. It included community amenities like a daycare center, a community garden, meeting spaces for neighborhood organizations, and a business incubator for local entrepreneurs. The financial returns would be lower than a straight sale, but the social impact would be transformational. We would maintain ownership of our properties while partnering with a larger developer who could provide the capital and expertise for a comprehensive community development project. Meridian Properties rejected our initial proposal, calling it idealistic and financially naive. But after 3 months of negotiations, media attention from local community organizations, and pressure from city council members who supported community-focused development, they agreed to a modified version that met most of our goals while still providing them with profitable returns. The final deal was complex, a joint venture that would renovate and expand our properties over 5 years, creating 180 units of mixed-income housing, 15,000 square feet of community-oriented retail space, and shared community amenities. Our family would retain 60% ownership of the developed properties, generating long-term income while serving the community we had always called home. More importantly, the process of negotiating that deal taught Terrell lessons about business that no MBA program could have provided. He learned how to balance profit with purpose, how to build coalitions with community stakeholders, and how to create value that couldn't be measured purely in financial terms. "Mama," he said after we signed the final agreements, "I understand now why you and Batty kept the business secret for so long." "What do you understand?" "I understand that wealth without character is dangerous. I understand that money without values is meaningless. I understand that success without service is hollow." Those words meant more to me than any financial returns we might earn from our investments. Today, 5 years after that conversation in my dining room, Terrell and I work together, managing our expanded real estate portfolio and overseeing the development project that is transforming our corner of the South Side. He has also started his own consulting firm, Smith Community Development, which helps other family-owned businesses navigate socially responsible growth strategies.
More importantly, he has become the kind of man his father would be proud of. He treats all people with respect, regardless of their economic status. He understands that privilege comes with responsibility. He knows that success is measured not just by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. I still clean buildings downtown 3 nights a week, not because I need the money, but because I enjoy the work and because it keeps me connected to the community I serve. Some people think I'm crazy for continuing to work a low-status job when I could afford to retire in luxury. But I've learned that there's dignity in all honest work, that every job serves a purpose, and that a person's value isn't determined by their title or their income. These are lessons I want to keep learning. Lessons I want to keep modeling from my son and the grandchildren I hope to have someday. The wooden box still sits in my bedroom closet, but it's no longer a secret. Terrell knows about every document inside it, and he helps me add new ones as our business continues to grow. More importantly, he understands that the real wealth isn't in those documents. The real wealth is in the relationships we've built, the community we've served, and the values we've maintained. When people ask me about the secret to building generational wealth, I tell them it's not really about the money.
It's about building character that can handle wealth responsibly. It's about teaching your children to value hard work, treat all people with respect, and use their privileges to serve others. It's about understanding that true success isn't measured by how much you can accumulate for yourself, but by how much you can contribute to making the world a little bit better. And sometimes it's about having the patience to let your children discover who you really are when they're ready to see you clearly. The cleaning lady's secret wasn't hidden wealth. It was hidden wisdom. And the greatest reward wasn't the money I accumulated. It was watching my son grow into a man who understood that wealth and character must go hand in hand.
Terrell recently brought home a young woman named Keisha Williams, a social worker who grew up in our neighborhood and now runs a nonprofit organization that provides job training for formerly incarcerated individuals. When he introduced her to me, he said, "Keisha, I want you to meet my mother. She's the smartest businesswoman I know, and she's taught me everything important about life." That introduction meant more to me than any bank statement or property deed ever could. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Ruby Mae's position? How long would you have waited to reveal the truth? And what do you think is the most important lesson about family, money, and values? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this journey from shame to respect, from assumptions to understanding, and from wealth without purpose to wealth with responsibility.